Hi, folks. This is Joe Firestone for Empowering Democracy. The topic again is how to make it happen. This is the concluding episode of that series. It's part 19. And we have two of our panel here tonight. Dee Pierce, who is the co-host of Around the World with Brandy and Dee, and Gregory Mallard, the activist from Georgia, who was about to start to stream himself. And we're looking forward to his beginning to stream. Have you a name for your series yet, Greg?
It's going to be over. I'm going to be launching a new page on Facebook. It's going to be called Revolution Evolution. That's going to be the name of the page that I'm going to be working on launching and then having a logo made for that. So I'll come up with a good name for my series on what I plan on covering. So I'll be covering this at great length, explaining everything that we have discussed thus far in our series that we have done together. And I also plan on hosting panels with various people of maybe the socialist alternative, the Green Party, people that we have talked with on this series as well, to get their input, so that way we can form a truly magnificent movement on this. Because I'm going to go ahead and say this, as somebody who is of the millennial generation, I have to be thinking about the next generation and leaving behind a better world for the generations after me. And that's why I stepped in to form this movement, so that way we can have a government that is clean of all corruption from corporate money. So I'm going to be doing a host of discussions. I'm going to be hosting candidate interviews on my page whenever I discover a candidate and look over all of their platform, what they're calling for, what they support, and then form a conclusion. Is this a candidate that we want to boost and support? Because if they are taking the big money during their campaign, we will not, I repeat, will not support your campaign. We will not support any efforts to get you elected into office. You have got to be for dumping the corruption and removing the corporate money which plagues our civilization and society.
Right. And you have to be for it to the extent that you don't take any of that money yourself. And you have to be for it in terms of supporting our campaign to get rid of it.
Yes, exactly. Because if you do not support what we're standing for, then I blatantly will refuse to support any candidate. I will refuse to support their campaign or any efforts at all. That's where I'm drawing the line. You're either with our movement or you're not.
Yes, I am drawing the line there too, Greg.
We have got to draw a line.
Yes.
And that's what dumping the corruption is about. We are done, and that's where the line is drawn.
About drawing the line, it's about a litmus test. It's about every voter using the litmus test to clean the money out of politics at every level, the federal level, the state level, the local level, the dog catcher level, at every level.
all the way down to the ant hill.
Okay. Okay, so I'd like to go on to talk about the things we decided upon during this series once again, just to give us some more chance to think about some other things we want to put into our framework. We've been developing a framework here for the movement, for our shows, uh, for bringing the movement to the country and making it effective. So, in relation to the empowering democracy shows themselves, we're going to initially start off with 30 minutes on candidate funding records for Dump the Corruption with 3, 4, or 5 streams per week. I want to add to that statement to say that as we start off, we're going to be looking at the candidate funding records for the people in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, okay, the CPC, because they claim to be progressive, they claim to be on our side, they claim to be defending the values of democracy. We need to see to what extent, in spite of their assertions about that, they are bought by the donors. We hope to establish a record for all the members of the CPC, and on that basis to be able to tell people who the people are, if any, who are not taking any of the big money. And also for each of these shows, we're also going to spend 10 minutes on memes that will be created by a meme team that we help to organize at this point, but that will be headed up by one of the meme designers themselves. And we'll spend 10 minutes, okay, on our outreach efforts to organizations that are outside of our campaign, but that are willing to accept us, okay, as educators, and willing to have us on their shows, willing to have us in their meetings, explaining what Dump the Corruption is about. We'll also be spending 10 minutes on news relevant to Dump the Corruption. And then a final 10 minutes on comments. We mean here, of course, comments from the people who think it's important enough to come to our shows. And we also set up a framework, okay, of activities. First, of course, StreamYard streams. Second, creation and dissemination of the memes, or distribution of the memes, if you like. Third, we're designating the outreach activities as a separate category. Fourth, we'll be engaged in recruiting other streamers. Fifth, we'll be recruiting candidates, okay, as interviewees and supporters of the Dump the Corruption movement. That's what Greg was talking about just now. We're also going to feature other movements involved in community uplifting. So that's the sixth type of activity that we're talking about here. The seventh type of activity is featuring third-party activities, thinking, okay, and leaders. And Greg was talking a little bit about that as well. Now he'll be doing that in his shows. So, would anybody like to add anything to that framework? Okay, at this point.
I think as we go, we'll add more to the framework. Is something that I'm expecting us to all have a discussion over. I think we're going to add to it and keep adding to it as we go, even after other elections. I think each election cycle will add more to that.
Right, because we'll learn more.
Yeah, and I think what we need to add to our framework is things that we can learn from in regards to what to work on in the next election, which I think it's like learning experiences would be a great thing to add to that.
Okay, why don't we add it right now?
And one thing we also need to be prepared for is all of the attacks that we're going to get. Because we're going to be attacked front, right, left, right, and center.
Oh, sure.
And we got to be on our toes.
We have to be on our toes, but
Mm-hmm.
we also cannot lose our cool.
Nah, we cannot.
We have to be careful how we interact with people.
Mm-hmm. You got to be calm, cool, and collective.
Yes. Which is hard for passionate people like ourselves.
Yeah, especially me in particular.
No, I wasn't thinking of you in particular, Greg. I was thinking of me too.
I just had to throw that out there.
And so did I. Okay, and D, what do you have to say?
To go along with Greg, that we pretty much will learn and grow as we go along, what we need to add, what we don't need
And
to
we're
be
gonna have
doing, and everything like that.
yeah,
Lessons from the past.
and we're gonna have to catalog the learning experiences.
Yes, we do.
In the field of knowledge management, that is known as the lesson learned activities.
Yes, that is very important.
Yes.
Yeah,
I ran up against that in knowledge management over about 15 years, I guess.
and we also need to not feel discouraged at all because we are going to succeed in one way or another. So win or like a quote I said, you win some, you lose some, but you live to fight another day. And I learned that from the movie Friday.
Right. There was something similar in that movie with Kevin Costner and Susan Sarandon and her husband. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains. But that was a baseball movie.
Well, we pretty much know too, because there's been so many issues that we're involved with, and you learn. And the issue too with you think about with Bernie, the excitement, everybody coming together, and so there's things we learn through the whole Bernie movement, and then with Tim Conover and everything else, there's lessons learned.
There were
There's
lessons
growth.
learned there, but also the Tim Canova experience was very disappointing because of how obvious it was that he was cheated
Mm-hmm.
and how obvious it was that no one in the conventional political system wanted to do anything about that.
Exactly. So it just says they get away with it.
So they get away with it, yes.
I mean, accountability would have been something that would have people would have said, well, yeah, they did wrong, but they were accountable. Tim Canova's in office or something. But no, they didn't. They just said, yes, we're going to do this every time you challenge us. This is what we do.
Yes, yes. This is what we do. And the Republicans, who had the machinery of law enforcement in Florida, would not do anything about it.
Right. It's just right there. They can see that it's lawless.
Yes, yes. We can see that it's lawless. Yes. That there are no standards to apply here. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to do at this point. We believe that this framework defines the parameters of a movement, our movement, as it is starting up. And so, starting next week, that's what we're going to be doing. I'll be starting on Monday night with the first of the candidate funding shows. I don't know if I'll be able to assemble a meme team over the weekend because of the weekend, but I'll try. And if I'm successful and have a few memes, then we'll spend our 10 minutes on memes. We do have some outreach news, and we'll be giving that on Monday as well. And I'm sure there will be some news that will be relevant to dump the corruption, because it seems as if there's always news that is relevant, okay, to dump the corruption. So we'll be covering that in our first show on Monday, okay, as well. And then, of course, we'll have our comment segment, okay, as well. So that's what we're going to be doing for New Year's, starting on January 2nd. By the way, we already have something in the news that's relevant on January 2nd. Well, not really on January 2nd, but news that would be relevant on January 3rd. That news is going to be the formal election of Hakeem Jeffries as the Speaker of the House. And by becoming the Speaker of the House, he will become a primary target for our movement, because he is as corrupt as they come.
Oh yeah, we also need to, like, discussing him. We also need to go after the House Whip, which is Catherine Clark, isn't she? If I'm not mistaken.
Catherine Clark.
Yeah, we need to go all the way from the top down.
Yeah, Catherine Clark.
Even
Catherine Clark of Massachusetts is who we're talking about. And then there's also the chairperson of the Policy Caucus, whose name is Peter Aguilar. I believe his first name, okay, is Peter. In my estimation, he hasn't been very active in policy circles. I don't know how he becomes qualified to be the policy chair of the Democratic caucus, like what he's done to put him in that particular position. But he was, I won't say elected to it, he was selected to it by Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries. And that was in preference Batu Joe Neguse, Colorado.
So they found the most useless puppet and put him in a position of power when
Yes.
he has literally done absolutely nothing.
He's literally done absolutely nothing that I can find that's very relevant to policy.
What state is he from?
California.
Pete Aguilar. There we go. I found him.
What's he known for?
Ha, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And he is now the chair elect of the House Democratic Caucus. And he's assuming the position post January 3rd.
As of January 3rd.
Yes.
The current chair of the Policy Caucus is Hakeem Jeffries. That's the position which is the heir apparent to the Speaker, or which has been in recent history.
Okay, this is very laughable, but he is literally part of a wine caucus.
Of course,
this is no joke. This is no joke. He is literally
very relevant for California, for California business.
Like if I were elected to Congress, I would much rather be part of like an agricultural policy caucus, because me being from the backwoods of South Georgia, it would make more sense for somebody like me to serve on something that reflects my own community.
Well, he probably represents at least some of the wine country in California, doesn't he?
Yeah, hang on. I'm looking up his 31st congressional district. It's his district. Hang on. I'll tell you if he's going to. There we go. I'm looking up something right now.
Okay.
To see something. I'm looking for their House results for their primary to see if he would be a. Wouldn't it be amazing just to get rid of somebody in power like that? Like the DCCC chairman who did it to himself because he chose to go to Europe and meet with donors instead of actually going to his own voters and own constituents.
Yep. Well, we had a good feeling like that when Joe Crowley was defeated by AOC. We had a moment like that, but for Dump the Corruption, we have to have more than a moment like that.
We want to upset.
We have to defeat Hakeem Jeffries, Catherine Clark, also Jim Clyburn,
okay.
And Aguilar.
Oh, get this. Jim Clyburn is just next door to me.
He's just next door to you? You mean in the next district?
South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina, right.
Right over the river from me.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. That's how close his district is to where I live.
His district is one of the poorest districts in the country,
Yes, it is.
and
And
he does nothing for his district. And he's managed to convince the people in that district to keep on returning him to Congress. He's
and let me
managed to
tell you,
persuade them
you,
that there's no hope for good government, so they should keep on electing him.
and as somebody who has actually been inside of his congressional district over there, let's just say poverty runs amok in Jim Clyburn's district, and he does absolutely nothing for the people of his congressional district. In all of the cities that I have been into over the last few years within his own district are so run down and so poorly managed. Like there's poor infrastructure in his own district. And that's from firsthand account of what I've seen.
And he was
Like,
the congressional whip for, well, starting from the time 2007, okay, that Nancy Pelosi first took over the House as Speaker. Jim Clyburn was her whip, okay, for the Democratic Party. All through the period from 2007 through 2022,
and he is
he was
just
the
as useless as a Democrat, just like Jim Jordan is for the Republicans.
he couldn't get anything materially important for his district
No.
all that time.
And as somebody who has been in his district a lot over in South Carolina, there is very much a lot of poverty. There are a lot of even Bernie supporters who refuse to even vote for him in an election.
Yeah, well, of course, the Bernie supporters would refuse to vote for him, right?
Look at what Cora Manuel just said. Why not get Greta Thunberg after these corrupt politicians? Like
Because
she did with Andrew Tate.
she's too busy getting after corrupt politicians in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, she has enough to do over there. I know she has said one or two good things concerning our politicians, but I think she's got a lot of work ahead of her over there. Yeah, because neoliberal corruption is all over the place. Yeah, in Europe too. The EU is rotten with it. Okay.
Yeah, look at Labor Party leader Keir Starmer.
But that's the UK, which of course is not a part of the Eurozone. Look, okay, at Ursula von der Leyen. She is totally corrupt. Look
Yeah.
at most of the members of the EU Parliament. They are totally corrupt.
I like that one guy in the European Parliament that's from Ireland.
I think you're thinking of.
He's a blonde haired dude. Kind of looks like he stuck his finger in a bug zapper or something, or a light socket.
That's funny.
He always shows up there in like blue jeans to the European Parliament deal, and he's working. He's truly the working class.
The one who I think is the greatest, I think she's from Scotland, or she might be from Ireland. But I'm trying to think of her name. But she is up there It must be once a week. She is up there critiquing the war. She's up there critiquing austerity, critiquing corruption. She's one of a very small people in the parliament, the EU parliament, who are opposed to the Ukraine war. And she lets everybody know it as often as she possibly can.
Didn't she vote against Ukraine's like spending on Ukraine as well?
Yes, she did. She voted against it, and she talks against it. I don't know how many times a week. She's always up there. And then there's usually a gray-haired guy in jeans who's listening to her in the background while she harangues. He's kind of sitting there supporting her.
I would put her as the EU president.
I'm sorry, say it again. Oh, you'd vote for her for president? Well, I think Greg has faded out for the time being anyway.
What I said was make her the EU president or something like that.
I don't think she's corrupt enough. President. Democratic political consultant by the name of Steve Maviglia will most likely be against dump the corruption. He's not the only one.
There's going to be a whole host of people that's going to rail against us. And we have to be mentally, and we've got to be the thing is that we need to add to our framework is being mentally prepared for the attacks. That's going to happen in one fashion or another. We're going to be attacked. And there's no way around it. There's really no way around it. That's one thing we have to be prepared for.
Okay, but we also know that until we begin to count for something, they're not going to attack us because they don't want to attract attention to us.
Yeah, because the more they attack us, the stronger we get.
And so they won't want to attack us until we've become somewhat important.
Oh, yeah. What's the saying? First they attack you or something, or something like that. I don't know how that saying goes. First they attack you, then they fight you, then you win or something.
Yeah, but I think there's another then you in there somewhere. Oh, I think it's first they ignore you, right? Then they call you names, okay, or ridicule you. Okay, it's what Gandhi said. It's a quote from Gandhi. Then they attack you, okay, and then you win.
But one thing that I am going to be working on is working with third parties, like in particular the Green Party. And that's part of what we were discussing in our framework. That's what I'd like to do is work with the Greens and all that.
Okay, we have to get some people.
Yeah, we do.
Who are interested in working with the Libertarians or some others of the third parties on the right.
I have some Libertarian friends on Facebook, and I will be discussing this with them. I'm going to get them in a call like on Zoom and get them on board.
Okay, now I have a problem to introduce.
Yeah.
It's actually okay. It's an obvious problem. Okay. When it comes to who we get on and who we basically make members of our team,
Mm-hmm.
I dumped the corruption team. There are some minor parties in this country that are clearly against democracy. They are publicly fascist parties.
Yeah, those are the ones that we're not going to touch.
I agree with that. In other words,
stay away.
The Constitution, the way I like to think of it is, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. There are certain groups that are out of bounds of the Constitution. And those groups are groups that are opposed to the Constitution, that want to end the Constitution and the rights that it guarantees to people. And those people have to be out of bounds for us.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch those types of people with a 10-foot pole.
Now, we just had a discussion about that, okay, or in a way, okay, it was about that. Okay, a couple of the Brandy and D streams, okay, a couple of days ago, when we were talking about the University of California and the student groups there, and whether the student groups ought to allow in certain speakers who were opposed to the basic principles of the student groups themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And there were the free speech absolutists. I consider myself pretty close to being a free speech absolutist. But, okay, I've always been opposed to including people inside of a group if those people are themselves opposed to free speech, but also demand that they have a free speech right. I have a problem with that. There has to be consistency in basic principles.
That's very true. Because without consistency, you're not going to succeed.
Yes.
And that's what I've always been told throughout my life, that in order to have true success, you've got to have consistency behind you.
Okay, so I think as we go forward, we will encounter problems like that more and more, where some groups will want to be included in what we do,
Mm-hmm.
but they will not share the views of empowering democracy.
Yeah, that's the one thing we've also got to have a mental framework. And that's why I said we need mental preparedness in our framework. So that way we are prepared for different scenarios going forward. So that way we know what to do and how to conduct ourselves and how to handle it.
Okay, I see a discussion has broken out or begun here in our comments about, oh, it's from KRTD Media. That's probably Shane, but who is KRTD Media? Shane said, see you all tomorrow on the live stream. Robert Copeland said, I just woke up after taking a nap. Steve Wolfbrand says, yes, KRTD, looking forward to that. Kay says, what live stream KRTD? Kay, it's an all-day show with a bunch of channels chipping in. Tune in. Steve Wolfbrand said, a bunch of panels, Kay. Steve says, hi, Dolores. KRTD says, YouTube has given KRTD a strike. We are unable to stream our own event to our channel. It is a strike for a video that is 2 years old that we deleted when YouTube told us to delete it. So it will just get streamed to HLM, Sabby Sabs, Chicago Corner, and the KRTD Rockfin. So Shane, why don't you stream it to here? Because we, of course, are participating in your New Year's Eve show. Specifically, I will be on the 10 a.m. panel, which is an MMT panel on the causes of inflation. And we'll have a number of big names in MMT on that panel, or KRTD will. Specifically, Warren Mosler will be there. He's the biggest of the MMT names on there. But Steve Keen will also be there. He's a very big name in his approach to economics, which is very, very close to MMT. It's a fellow traveler, MMT, but he specializes in simulations. Also, Dirk Enst will be on this panel. He's a European thinker, very well known for his MMT work, and a very good book that he recently published. Also, Jeff Epstein is going to be on that panel. Mike Hall from the UK will also be on that panel. And I will be on that panel.
I think somebody said that I was going to be there as well, but I'm not sure.
Okay, have you been contacted by Shane?
Not yet, but I'm sure he will. But I can probably message him.
Okay, so Steve Wolfbrand says KRTD, that's insane. KRTD's Joe's on a few of our panels. I think at midnight we are talking about voting or not voting. Yes, Shane is correct. At midnight.
Yes, Brandy and I are on that panel. Yeah, Greg, you're on that panel too, Greg.
Yes.
Which one?
At
Okay.
midnight.
Okay. Hold everything.
Oh, okay.
Hold everything. There is a to vote or not to vote panel at 12 a.m. It's the first panel of the new year. Okay, at 12 a.m. I will be moderating that panel. And you, Greg, and Dee, and Brandy, and Madeline will all be on that panel. Okay. And
can we bring some dump to corruption in there?
We absolutely can bring some dump the corruption in there. The way dump the corruption fits in, okay, is as follows. This is a panel which is directed to people. They have to make a decision whether to vote, okay, or not to vote. There are many people who now say that voting does not matter, that we ought to do movements, but voting does not matter because the donors control the elections. So why waste your time? Just spend time, okay, on activist movements. Don't spend any time, okay, on voting. That's the argument. I may be oversimplifying it or stating it in too stark a way, but that's the stereotypic form of that particular argument, the question that's on the table for this panel. So, of course, the answer to whether you vote or not to vote in that particular context depends upon what you're voting for. For what purpose are you voting? What are you intending to accomplish? If what you're intending to accomplish is to dump the corruption, then of course you vote. You vote in the primaries, you vote in the general, you vote early and often. Of course, that's a joke. But the point being, voting is very, very important because only by voting can you get the toxic money out of politics, okay, and make, okay, I think this is coming from Dee, so I'm going to mute her for now, so don't get that noise. Okay, so that's how Dump the Corruption gets in there. And then we can discuss why it's so important to vote in order to make Dump the Corruption happen. Yeah, we'll all be talking about that. We'll also be joined by someone else who I believe is connected to RP at this point, but he is the author, okay, of MMT for Dummies. He's got a stream known, okay, as MMT but for Dummies, and he's going to be joining us then, okay, as well on that panel. So it's going to be ourselves and the guy who's been doing the MMT for Dummy streams. Okay, he expressed an interest in being on the vote or not to vote panel. So I exchanged with him on Twitter for some time, and I decided he'd be pretty good for us to have on the panel to talk with us about it. And who knows, he might even want to join the Dump the Corruption movement. Okay. So those are the two panels that I'm on. And of course, okay, I asked all of you some time ago whether you wanted to be on the vote or not to vote panel. And you all said yes.
I just forgot about it.
Okay, I am reminding you now, but also, okay, I'm certainly going to send you the stream link. I got the stream link for that panel from Shane just yesterday.
Oh, cool.
And I will be sending it out to all of you.
I got the link from Shane yesterday too, but you could put it in our chat too.
Oh, yeah, that's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to put it in our chat. So all of us who normally participate here will be able to attend.
Don't mean to interrupt for just a sec, but it's just been put 2 minutes ago by a local meteorologist with a local station here that Barbara Walters, long-time legendary news woman, has passed away.
I guess the first question you ask in a situation like that is, how old was she?
93 years of age.
Yes,
Yeah, I know she had Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah,
So
Barbara
bad.
Walters of that was a long time anchor woman has passed away. I just felt that with us talking about stuff that is newsworthy, I thought that this would be worthy of bringing up during our show.
And what I was going to say with Barbara Waltz is you really see somebody that an intelligent woman and the jobs she had and what she did and accomplished, and then later on to have Alzheimer's and not even know who she is or know who people are anymore.
yes, I know. That is awful. Is there a list of who and what time each panel starts? Uh, Robert, I'd suggest that you go to the KRTD Media Twitter page. The schedule must be there.
Or it could be on their Facebook page for those on Facebook as well.
Oh, so Shane says Joe will need to forward you the link. Yes, I know I need to forward you the link, and I will do so. Greg says, I'd love to come and join you all. Around the World with Brandy and D says Gregory is an activist and regular on our shows. Yes, he is. There's Cora Manuel. Steve Wolfbrand says, hi, Cora. Robert Copeland says, a Democratic political consultant by the name of Steve Maviglio will most likely be against dump the corruption. Is he on the Democratic National Committee? If he is, he'll be against dump the corruption. And Carr says, why not get Greta Thunberg after
Thunberg.
these corrupt politicians? Well, according to the pronunciation of her name that was given on the Democracy Now! Show some years ago now, the Swedes pronounce that as Thunberg. Okay, which is quite interesting. Okay, at least according to Amy Goodman. And you know that Amy is quite careful about these things. And
She is the best anchor that I've ever followed.
yeah, she is.
And she's very nonpartisan and not even biased.
Nonpartisan in the party sense of the term.
Yeah.
But I think she is, and I give her credit for this, I think it's a good thing that she is biased towards the environment, towards doing something about climate change, towards democracy itself. Her show's title is a call for democracy now. Okay. So, or at least that's the way I've always interpreted it.
Just like with us with empowering democracy and our Don't the Corruption movement that we want to build.
Yes. Yes.
Because I would love to see this like grow over the next 2 years to having local and state chapters. That would be beautiful.
Oh, yes. We're going to need to have that. We're going to need to have that because, okay, it's similar to the Red Berets movement. In order to have the national movement be strong and be something to reckon with, you have to have state chapters that are strong, okay, and that are activist, and that are always working for your issue, whether it be at the state level or the national level. As we say in the Red Berets, we need to fight on all fronts. And that's, of course,
and I would actually like to see more of what the structure of the Red Berets looks like, so that way we can structure our movement for Dump the Corruption in the same fashion that the Red Berets is structured.
Okay, I've done some streams on that, Greg.
I would love to go back and watch some of those streams on how it's structured. So
Yeah.
that way we can add that to the framework of our movement.
Yes. In fact, um, as I've been talking about our movement, I've been consciously modeling it on the Red Berets movement, where there is no formal leader, okay, of an organization, because the Red Berets are not a formal organization. The Red Berets are a network. And the social center of the network, okay, is Laura Fielding. And she works with all kinds of people in many states, okay, across the country to fuel the movement for Medicare for All.
I remember my very first conversation with Laura Fielding, and it was a phone call that lasted for probably more than 45 minutes. Oh my God. That was an amazing phone call. And everything I have learned from that phone call has really resonated within me. She taught me everything about whole Washington and the Red Beret movement, and I was just enthralled with joy after that
No.
conversation. It was very, very insightful to, and I didn't know how Canada achieved it, but the way that they are doing it with whole Washington and CalCare would prompt a national movement for Medicare for All to become a nationalized deal.
Oh yes, if one of these states was to kick it off and people could see a successful model, it would be much more likely to spread first to other states and then to the country at large. But there are differences between the United States. Okay, in Canada, of course, they had what, 9 provinces, had to spread to 9 provinces. Here, it has to spread to 50 states, which is a far longer process. And especially when the culturally red states are so different from the culturally blue states. However, uh, so I think this causes certain changes in what the strategy should be, okay, what it ought to be. I think that it should be carried out at the straight level, of the state level, okay, as Laura certainly advocates, and as I've advocated, and a number of us who are working together, okay, on this advocate. But we would expect that after about the third or the fourth state is successful, okay, in getting it, that there would be a leap to the national level from there without actually having to go state by state. We see the movement as basically getting successful in one state and then knocking on the national door based on the success on the first state while working to get it accepted in the second state. When it gets accepted in the second states, again, we're pressuring on the national door. We're pressuring senators, okay, in those other states to respond to the national movement by representing the people in their states by coming out in favor, okay, of Medicare for All. Because basically it's going to be a situation where the more states that adopt single payer, the more pressure there's going to be on senators from states that don't have single payer to support single payer for their states because their constituents, okay, are really going to need it. So we see a kind of alternation between local pressure, state pressure, and national pressure, which eventually is going to result in a national program for Medicare for all. That's the way we're pursuing it. But the way Dump the Corruption comes in here is this process of going state, national, state, national, state, national, that's going to take a few years. We see being successful in whole Washington, that movement there is 4 or 5 years old, and it's made some progress, but it's not been successful yet. Okay, so the question is, are we prepared to wait another 4 or 5 years for Medicare for all at the national level? Are we prepared to wait until, let's say, 2029 or something like that to have it? One reason why I've been trying to start the Dump the Corruption movement is because I am not willing to wait. I am not willing to wait. If we get the Dump the Corruption movement started and we get hundreds of representatives of the House replaced in 2024 by people who don't take the big donor money, those people are going to be for Medicare for all because they won't be bought by the health insurance interests or the pharmaceutical interests. I think the shortest way to Medicare for all in time is through Dump the Corruption. I'm never going to try to discourage the movement workers and leaders, okay, for Medicare for all by claiming any kind of preference when it comes to allocation of time and money and things like that. But I do think, it is my opinion, that the quickest way to get a national Medicare for all bill actually done is to make the Dump the Corruption national movement successful.
And we also need a successful statewide movements as well, and also local level. And in my conversation that I had with Laura Fielding is states that do have legalized cannabis, they can put a tax on cannabis to help fund statewide Medicare for all.
Yes.
So the tax funds from that could fund Medicare for all on the state level.
They won't need.
Or they can apply for a federal block grant.
Okay, they could fund, but the funding plan for whole Washington has a way of capturing the Medicare Advantage funds from each state to fund whole Washington. In some of the streams I've done on that subject, I've gone over the details of how this would work. But the concept was originally developed by Jerry Friedman of the University of Massachusetts, and he's applied it both to financial analysis of whole Washington and financial analysis of the legislation that has been introduced in the legislature in Massachusetts, okay, as well. And I've done streams on that also. Okay, so to find those, you have to look back at my KRTD media streams and the earlier streams under my own byline. I've also had streams with many of the prominent people from the whole Washington movement where we talked over things like that. Andre Stackhouse, okay, and Laura, of course, okay, and Lisa. In fact, it was through those streams that I got to know Laura, okay, and Lisa, because the Red Berets movement was under attack by Steve Grumbine
Oh yeah, I remember that.
and his folks. And I jumped into that and began to defend them by refuting the points they were making that MMT demanded that this had to be done at the national level and that single payer at the state level was a waste of time. And my streams were successful, I think, in allowing them to fend off the opposition from the RP people. Myself and a few others
Yes.
were
Yeah, he
able.
sent his minions out after us.
I'm sorry, say that again, D.
He sent his minions out after us. He had us all blocked, so he would have, against all these people that are with him now, start attacking us.
Yes.
And it was the same thing over and over and over again.
It was the same thing over and over again, but they failed.
Yes.
Okay. And Red Berets go on, and their method of fighting, okay, on all fronts, okay, has now spread to other states. And so the RP opposition wasn't successful. In some ways, it strengthened the Red Berets movement. So anyway, that's the history of that.
Yeah, I remember Dolores mentioning that to me, and then I wasn't really, at the time, I wasn't so educated on whole Washington, but then I started looking more into it, and I was like, and then I had that call short, not too long after that, with Laura, a very insightful and educational call, and then I started saying, "Hey, we can do this," and let's say Washington started it. It went to California, then to Massachusetts, Illinois, Vermont, and possibly New York State. Let's say those states.
There is an effort in New York State now, which has been going on for some time. And so that is one of the most active states now.
Are there any Red Berets in New York State?
Yeah, there's a Red Beret chapter which is headed by Scott Denoyer, DESNOYERS. He lives in upstate New York, and he is the chapter leader there, and he will be organizing protests this spring. He's extremely active. I won't go through the story, but his son committed suicide as a result of not being able to get his insulin medicine. It's a harrowing story, and Scott frequently tells it and relives it, even though the pain for him is tremendous. Scott also is willing to travel all over the country to help strengthen the movement in other states. So that's been going on for a long time. In Spanish, they say, somos pocos, pero somos locos. We are few, but we are fearless. Yes, we are few, but we are fearless, Steve. There's a small political party called the American Independent Party here in California who is further to the right than the Republican Party. Well, that's fine, but the right is a vague term, as is the left. If the American Independent Party is a supporter of democracy, they would certainly be a political party that we would cover here, okay, in our work. Okay, I don't know anything about that party. Robert, yeah, and many people confuse it with being independent and register with them by mistake. Robert says they're going to be a panel on dump the corruption. Well, the panel on to vote or not to vote is going to be focused a lot on dump the corruption. That panel, as I say, is the first of the new year. It's from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. tomorrow night. Except it won't be tomorrow night. It'll be from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. on Sunday morning. Definitely bring in dump the corruption. You need the exposure. I don't understand people that think not voting is going to help anything. At least vote for a third party. Not voting would only help if the entire country did it. I still don't think that would help. Why would it help? They are happy. They are happy to have all the people refuse to vote except for those who were strongly connected to either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They would love that. If only 10% people voted, the establishment parties would love that. I mean, that's the way they got into power in the first place, and that's what they like to do. Steve says, my mother died of Alzheimer's. It's awful. I know. Steve said, Amy Goodman isn't what she used to be. I know she's not what she used to be, but she's still far and away the best of the major news shows. He says, my mother died of Alzheimer's as well, Steve. Steve says, I'm sorry, Dolores. He says, wow, Barbara Walters has died. Sad. Steve says, our M4A here in California got shot down twice now by the Democratic leadership. Sucks, and is another reason why we need dump the corruption. I heard there is a plan to do a ballot measure for CalCare. There is, but they've defeated ballot measures for CalCare there or something similar before. They can defeat the ballot measures because the big money is in for the ballot measures too. So that's why ballot measures are not the answer. They may get us there with one state or two states, but as I described before, this process of going back and forth from the state to the national level is going to be a slower process than the dumping corruption than our movement may be. I won't say it will be, but I put it as a conditional. If we get everybody to accept that in theory it could work if everybody did it, then more people are likely to do it. And by the way, it's not true that everybody has to do it. Only a portion of the voters in the districts across the country have to do it. only enough of the voters to defeat the Republican and Democratic candidates for office because they're taking money.
Yeah, the two generations that are likely to make that happen would be the millennial generation, which is my generation, and the generation after me, which is Gen Z.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know. And right now, my generation is probably the least likely to support such a movement. But if we can persuade them that it's stopping certain legislation that they want, okay, and they need, for example, Social Security here in the United States is paid out at about half the level in comparative terms of public pensions in other nations. So our people who have retired without much in the way of savings are in a much worse position than people over in Europe. Is our nation poorer than they? No. It's the politics. Our leaders would rather keep old people in poverty, just like they'd rather keep poor people in poverty, just like they'd rather keep certain ethnic groups in poverty. It's all about the way neoliberalism works. They want the public pension money for Wall Street, so Wall Street can make a bunch of profits off of that. They don't care whether or not they're putting the money that was pledged to the old people at risk by putting it in the stock market. They don't care about that. That's what they're doing, of course. So, Steve says, smash the like button. Thank you, Steve. Do smash that like, share, and subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. We need that. And we'll be very grateful if you all make sure that you're doing that. Robert says, another way to help fund the state-based single-payer healthcare system is by having a public bank. Yes, Robert, that is a way to help to fund it. And by the way, in turn, if you have state but public funds, if you have a state retirement plan right now, and you put the state retirement funds into a public bank, that helps to get the public bank actually started. And then in turn, the public bank is there to help to fund certain areas of the economy during a period in which there's a recession or depression in the state. The key example is the Bank of North Dakota, which was started in 1919, if I remember correctly, and which has existed ever since then, has a record of profitability ever since then, and has served to buttress the economy of North Dakota ever since then. So, in the only case in which we have state banks here in the United States, that example is a record of enormous success. Steve says, Washington, Oregon, California could make it happen. Together, Medicare for all, entire West Coast. Yeah, I know. That is one of my dreams. Washington, Oregon, and California doing it. Pretty soon, you'd have Arizona climbing aboard there, and Nevada climbing aboard there, New Mexico climbing aboard there, and Colorado climbing aboard there. All those states would turn into single payer states, I think, within 2 years, if that happened. Once the whole West Coast was in on it, you get those other states too. And then the eastern states, one by one, would start doing it until a pretty large population group of eastern states would have single payer as well. I calculated something like this in the past. The states I mentioned out west have about 75 million people. The states back in the east that would climb aboard such a program have another 72 million people. That would be almost 150 million people going for single payer. And then there's a regional center also starting in Minnesota. Could be Minnesota, Michigan, state of Illinois, uh, one or two surrounding states would be another cluster of states that would develop single payer early. And then the senators from surrounding states that did not have single payer would be badgering their senators for a national single payer program.
I think the states in the Northeast that would, well, the one Midwest state that I could see getting on it would be probably Illinois, maybe Minnesota.
Yeah, I think there's a strong single payer movement, okay, in Minnesota. That's why I think they're likely to be the first state in that region to get such a program, because their activists have been working for it for years, and they've been advocating for good programs. Also, Minnesota, it's changed somewhat over the years, but there was a time not too long ago in the 1970s, okay, and 1980s, that Minnesota was perhaps the most progressive state in the Union. So there's a progressive tradition there that is very strong. And I think the wheel is turning again, and that it could be a very, very strong progressive movement in that state supporting single payer. Robert Copeland says, the first time I ever heard of Joe and Lisa was the same day Sacramento City Council passed a resolution supporting Medicare for All and CalCare. Thanks, Robert. Cora Emanuel said, currently New York State has licensed only a scant few retailers to sell marijuana. This is true in Virginia also. I think there are only 4 or 5 retailers who could sell it to the public for medical purposes and recreational purposes. Bonnie and I were able to get certified a few weeks ago to buy marijuana products from one of the handful of retail places here, okay, in Virginia. And just 2 days ago, our first product, which had been out of stock, came into the local retail store, and we bought this product called Dharma Muscle Gel. Okay, it's for soreness, okay, and pain. And we had found out, kind of through accident, that it was very effective in treating Bonnie's the problem with her hip. Okay, and so we were looking for that product for a very long time. and we finally were able to to buy some. Okay, the other day. So we've been waiting for a long time, but it really
I could also see
works.
states like Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Jersey sign on to that as well. And I think if enough states signed on to it, then it would really prompt a national response, because you're going to see a lot more people in states that don't have it want it, and it's going to fire up a whole national movement, and that's exactly what we want, especially with also the corruption movement.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think that's going to be a powerful movement. I think senators from states that don't have marijuana retail stores are going to become looking to support a national marijuana movement,
Just like Medicare for All movement.
just like Medicare for All movement. Same dynamic involved. I think we're going to see these things grow.
You would have thought by now that there are a lot of states that do have legal cannabis. You would have thought by now it would have been legalized nationwide. And all that. But the reason why Big Pharma is paying off the corrupt politicians to keep it from being, because it's not just the big pharmaceuticals, it's also the private prison industry as well, which is paying off so many politicians to not do a national legalization measure on it.
Yeah, so they can keep on putting people in jail so they can get more contracts to
Yeah,
manage the jails.
and they also have contracts with ICE.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so BL, and I think this is the last question or comment that we're going to take. Well, I guess we've got a few comments, but after I finish those, we're going to call it quits because it is getting late and I have to be around for a 10 o'clock show tomorrow morning on New Year's Eve, the MMT show I talked about before. Comment by BL. Explain what Steve Grumbine did and said, why he was trying to sabotage whole Washington. He looks like a creep. Okay. There is a movement for Medicare for All that is a national movement. Some of the leaders of that movement, kind of an offshoot, okay, of the Physicians for National Health Care, that sincerely believe that the state level movements cannot be successful for fiscal reasons. They make certain assumptions about the fiscal drain that would be placed on states if they had to support single payer health care. Okay, so not only Steve, okay, and real progressives believe this, but there are people who come out of the national movement for healthcare who were bigwigs in that movement, who have taken an official position, okay, opposing the state level single payer movement, saying they're a waste of resources, a waste of time, and that everybody for national health care ought to unite behind their movement, which is exclusively for fighting for national health care. They look at the state level efforts as a distraction, and they think sincerely that the state level movements are a harmful distraction which waters down the power of the national movement. It's a very simple argument, really. At the state level, the governments, they argue, don't have the fiscal capacity. They're not able to run any deficits. And so when the economy turns down, they won't have the tax revenue coming in to support a single payer movement in the state. And furthermore, according to most of the state constitutions, they're not able to deficit spend. So they won't be able to ride out that kind of a financial crisis. Some of the state level people that have been formulating plans have formulated financial plans that build up surpluses in state trust funds to handle hard times like this. Okay. Now, Jerry Friedman showed in one of his analyses that in just a few years, a sufficient surplus was going to develop for the whole Washington plan, that it would be able to pay the full residual cost, of health care after tapping federal funds that could be tapped to fund really a couple of years of single payer in whole Washington without any further help or contributions from the federal government. There was that much money that could be raised. I've carefully examined Jerry Friedman's plan for it, and I agree with it. It does rely on federal funding, but the federal funding could be arranged for under the Medicare Advantage program, and it doesn't require any special help for the states that the private sector would not be getting from a Medicare Advantage program. Of course, the result of having the state be the administrator of a Medicare Advantage program, in the state of Washington, let's say, would be to drive out the private Medicare Advantage programs because of the profits they must make. So therefore, over a period of years, the state Medicare Advantage program would be driving them out of business, essentially leaving the state program as the only Medicare Advantage provider. So I'm not going to question Steve's motives. I'm not going to question the motives who favor the national-only approach to Medicare for all. I think there are some good people involved in that movement, but there is a disagreement over the financial details. There is a disagreement over the effects, the impacts of developing state-level movements for single payer that succeed in some of the states. In other words, people who believe in the state-level movements or the state-level path to get to Medicare for all believe that you have to consider the movement impact of the state-level movements. You have to consider the dynamics of the situation. You have to consider the pressure placed on senators in states that don't provide single payer to their people. You have to consider a number of other movement dynamics that suggest that national success for the Medicare for All movement actually needs robust state movements and local movements for its very support. We believe that right now there is an insufficient basis for pushing a national level movement through, because the leaders of the legislature are bought by the donors. And there's not enough of an active national movement to overcome the resistance of the leaders of both parties to a Medicare for All program. So we believe that in the short run, a national Medicare for All sort of movement cannot be successful. And we don't think it could possibly be successful. If we were all lucky, we believe it might be successful sometime in 2029 if everything went right. It might take even longer than that under simple common sense assumptions. So we believe that there has to be a state and local push, and there has to be a dump the corruption push as well behind it to make the passage of a national level Medicare for All program possible. So it's a disagreement between two blocks that have different strategies and different concepts. We believe it's smarter to fight on all fronts, and they believe it's smarter to focus on a particular area, being a national area, because the fiscal viability of a national program would be greater than the fiscal viability of a state program. We like to say, well, that's true if people were doing federal policy using MMT principles. Unfortunately, they're not. They're mostly using these fiscal responsibility myths to run things at the national level. Okay, so in effect, from a political point of view of what is possible given the national environment, you don't get to use the capacities that the national government would have according to MMT principles. So I've tried to explain as fair a way as possible the differences between the two groups. I'm not going to impute any bad motives to Steve's group and people associated with him. I'm not going to impute any bad motives or the sole source of virtue to the state level movements. There are differences in strategy here, differences in understanding. I think the differences of opinion, okay, are honest. Steve Wolfbrand said, Cora, we have dispensaries everywhere. That's in California, I assume. Millions are going to be kicked off Medicaid in 2023. I know that is awful. Steve Wolfbrand says that's what happened in Canada, started with only one province. I know. The opponents of that model like to say that this is not Canada, this is the United States. There are virtually 50 provinces here. So you have to capture a whole bunch of provinces to really do this. And of course, the kind of opposition that we have here from the neoliberals in red states is entirely different from the kind of opposition Canada had during the period from 1947 to, I believe they finally got their Medicare for All, if I recall, in 1967 or 1971. It was during that period. But the move for Medicare for All in Canada started with one province, Saskatchewan, which did something very important in 1947. So it was still close to 25 years before that evolved into Medicare for All in Canada. So I'm not sure Canada is such a good model. There are certain aspects of the Canadian process that can be applied to the United States. It's good to point that out, to point out the true Canadian experience, but it's not a decisive argument for the state level approaches. We have to base the state level the state level approaches on other things apart from Canada's experience. Fortunately, there are other reasons from which we can argue that a multi-level approach, local, state, and national, can work to produce national Medicare for all policy. Cora says, yes, New York just opened its first one. Slowly, they're going to allow more. Kay said, we need single payer badly. Cora says it takes time. I'm not really into weed anymore. As we say, Steve, you might infer from that, Bonnie, are not into weed for the sake of weed. We're not looking for mental transformations from weed or anything like that, but the reason why we buy marijuana products is for kind of obvious things, like they can help to take away pain. And that's good. They're more effective, than aspirin. And that's good. Or Tylenol or all the other things.
Wasn't taken internally.
And we don't have to take anything internally. And we don't have to smoke, which we don't think is good for you. So, but it works a lot better than liniment. Steve says, Gregory's accent cracks me up. Do Californians have an accent as well? Besides the Valley girls? We all have accents. All across the country, our accents are different. I'm obviously from New York. I've discarded some of the New York accent. For example, I no longer say New York. But
wait till you hear Cora Emanuel's accent. I heard it the other day and it sounded like a New York accent.
Oh, did it? Okay, and then there's Bernie's accent. He's a Brooklynite. You can tell immediately he comes from Brooklyn.
And then there's like the same accent like Howie Hawkins has.
Well, what kind of accent is that?
Some kind of New Yorker accent. I'm not sure which part of New York he's from, to be exact.
It's probably New York State, but like the accent that people from Buffalo has. Far different.
Oh, man, they have been getting hammered up there in Buffalo, talking about Buffalo.
Right, but they have accents that are far different, from New York accent. One difference, for example, is in...
Interesting. He was born in San Francisco.
Is in the pronunciation, of roof. In New York City, we say roof. In Buffalo, they say roof, or something like that.
The rough.
Yeah, the rough. Yeah.
The roof.
Say
the roof.
Roof.
The roof is on fire.
Not the rough. I mean, when I first I heard that pronunciation of roof. I heard that first in Michigan when I went to graduate school up there. They say it the same way they say it in Buffalo. So Buffalo has more of a Midwestern accent than it has a New York accent. Which is
I'm probably the first person that you've ever had with a deep South Southern accent like mine on your show.
Yeah, maybe. I can't uh, really recall if I've had anybody else. I think some of the candidates for Congress that I
Cor- yeah, Cora just said he's got a Long Island accent.
Long Island?
that's
Yeah, that's where Cora's from. He's from Long Island.
but Cora has a Swedish name, right?
Yeah, I think so. Norwegian or something like that. Because he and I were talking about that a while back about him having Norwegian ancestry.
Okay, join our official dumping the corruption. Yes, dumping the corruption FB group. Everyone. Wait a minute. Let me get that. Ah, Jesus. Okay, Greg says, wait till you come here. Almost everyone around my part of Georgia sounds like I do. But Jimmy Carter doesn't sound like you do.
Yeah, I've been told that before.
Yeah,
Maybe we need somebody with my tone of accent up there in DC.
maybe.
That would be fun.
Yeah,
Would
I'd
be-
get up there and straighten them all out.
You know,
I would be the. Imagine if I was the first dump the corruption candidate elected. I would go up there and hold them all accountable.
yes, you would. You know who your accent reminds me of? There used to be a senator called Sam Ervin from South Carolina. You know Sam Ervin?
Nah, I'm not familiar with him.
He used to refer to himself as an old country boy, an old country lawyer. Okay. And he was instrumental in the fall, okay, of Richard Nixon, okay, in the Watergate affair. He was a central figure in bringing Nixon down. Sam Ervin, the old country boy from South Carolina, and he had an accent like yours, Greg.
Yeah, there are people from over there that do sound a lot like that have my accent.
Anyway, Sam Ervin, he was so funny and he was so good.
My
was,
accent is like that of Pappy O'Daniel from Oh Brother Where Art Thou.
he was really one of the big heroes of the Nixon affair. He really was. He was a strong defender of democracy. Kay says, yes, Greg, and bless your heart in the best meaning. Steve Wolfman said, sorry. Steve Wolfman said, hillbilly, sorry. And Steve Wolfman said, mushrooms yet? DMT, yes. What's DMT? Forgive me for not knowing. Kay says, I have an Ohio accent, which is none. Laugh out loud. Yes, it's often said that people from Ohio don't have any accent and they don't recognize that they have a Midwestern accent, which maybe is no accent at all. I don't know. Greg says, I have a long guy land accent. Laugh out loud. Oh, a Long Island. A Long Island accent. Yes, I get it. Accents are amazing. There's probably several here in Los Angeles here alone. Yeah, there are a lot of different accents in New York City there. There's a Bronx accent. There's a Brooklyn accent. There's a Manhattan accent. Each of the boroughs has different accents.
And right across the Hudson, you have that Chris Christie accent.
Yes. Yeah, God love him. You got that Chris Christie accent.
When did you realize realize you had an accent to it?
When did I realize I had an accent?
How old were you?
I suppose I realized I had an accent uh, when I started Cornell.
Hmm.
And I realized that only people from New York had an accent like mine.
Uh-huh.
It was great. I loved it when
Huh?
Trump served what's his face? Just talking
Did you adjust your
Christie.
microphone?
Mashed potatoes and meatloaf when he went to the White House.
Down here, we call them mashed taters.
Yeah, because Chris Christie was shocked because it was seeing the great meals everybody else was having, and his meal was mashed potatoes and meatloaf from Trump.
So Steve Wolfbrand says, Doc, go to Joe Rogan to learn about DMT. It's amazing. Okay,
What's DMT?
I will.
I don't even know what that is.
What is it?
Steve Wolfbrand says Doc has an accent. Yeah, I have an accent. I do. But I don't have the accent I had when I first came out of New York City and went to a college that was upstate. Then my accent was further modified by living in Michigan for 5 years. Then it was further modified by living in Buffalo for another 6 years.
One accent that I'm very fascinated with is British accents.
Right, but there are so many British accents.
I like that accent from up there around Liverpool.
The Cockney accent.
Yeah, and I like Jeremy Corbyn's accent in particular.
Yeah, I like Jeremy Corbyn's accent too.
I love Steel Corbyn.
Yeah, you know, I love it when that crowd comes out and they start singing, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn." I love that.
What about Irish accents? I like them.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
It's like that dude that's the member of European Parliament that from Ireland. I don't recall his name, but he's a badass dude.
Okay, the woman I was talking about before is Claire Daly.
Oh, okay.
That's her name. So look for Claire Daly. She's amazing.
Yes, I like her too.
Thank you,
And
Deborah.
Devorah says, "I love Claire Daly." Yeah.
Okay, so she is a member of European Parliament, and she has been a member there since 2019, like
Yeah.
July of 2019 there.
Yep. She raises a ruckus. She raises a ruckus.
Oh, cool. So she is part of a socialist party there in Ireland. So
Yes.
yes, I love socialist parties.
She is. So Steve Wolfbrand gives a formal definition. DMT is a hallucinogenic drug that takes you to other universes where other entities live. Okay. I suppose I might like to take a trip that takes me to other universes where other entities live.
Yes, that's what they did in biblical times. And they wrote down when they came down everything that was said to them.
Right. And also, of course, the Indian cultures here have used hallucinogenic drugs. Hallucinogenic drugs for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Okay, the dude that I was talking about that is the member of European Parliament that I was talking about. His name is Mick Wallace.
Yeah, I think he's the guy who sits in back of her when Claire Daly is doing her speech making.
He called the U.S. out on numerous occasions, and so has Clara Daly as well.
Yep.
So both of them have called out the U.S. on even being a country that doesn't even guarantee health care as a human right. Like the dude is literally Jeremy Corbyn through and through. He's a Jeremy Corbyn type.
Okay.
And he's even called out Nigel Farage on several occasions, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we are about done. At this point, it's 10:59.
Yeah, and you have that 10 o'clock.
And thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dee. If we don't see you for the rest of the weekend, then Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You can come to see us tomorrow in the first hour of 2023. We will be on KRTD Media. At that point, if KRTD Media lets us stream from their page or somehow contrives, I don't know exactly how that works. But if we can join the others, then we will certainly help them to get to YouTube through our channel. And Judith J. Van Ryzen says, love your show, Joe. Thank you, Judith.
Oh, I've always loved Joe's shows.
Encourage other people to join.
Yes, encourage other people to join as well.
Joe's show is like being at home. I could just come in here and kick back and chill and relax and have fun.
Yes, with Joe's fan club.
Okay, thanks, everybody. So, if you want to come see us in the first hour of 2023 and get wished a Happy New Year by us, Dee will be there, and Greg will be there, and I will be there, and hopefully Brandy will be there.
Madeline.
Hopefully Madeline will be there. Have I forgotten anybody? I don't think so.
Let's invite everybody, Lisa, Layla, everybody. Everybody is welcome to come and join us for the fun.
Yes. In fact, what I think that I will do is I will send a stream key to Lila, okay, and to Lisa, okay, as well. In fact, I expect to be in touch with Lisa tomorrow by phone. We're trying to make a connection today, but we were not successful today. Maybe we will be tomorrow. And if so, and if she's not going out with David for New Year's, maybe she'd be willing to join us on to vote or not to vote tomorrow. So I will send the stream keys to them, okay, as well. And hopefully everybody will be there. Hopefully we can have our own little New Year's Eve party tomorrow on KRTD Media, courtesy Shane Coughlin and the KRTD Media crew, who, even though we are no longer a part of that crew, we are quite friendly to them.
Steve, I love you too, brother.
Thank you, Steve. We do love you. Steve says, if I can stay up that long, laugh out loud. Yeah.
Well, actually, Steve's 3 hours behind, so.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
He'll be up. He won't miss an opportunity to come hang out with us.
Yeah. And Kay, Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow night as well. But if not, then have a very, very happy New Year.
Oh, you'll
Yes,
see
Happy
me
New Year.
tomorrow night.
Sorry, say that again.
You'll see me tomorrow night, that's for sure.
Oh, I know.
Yes.
I know. We'll see you, Greg.
Yes, because we are family.
We are family. Yes.
I had to break out in a little dance there.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Yes,
Night,
good night,
night. See
everybody.
y'all
Thank you.
tomorrow evening.
It's been great.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Dee. Haven't quite ended yet.